Welcome back to Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Bill, how are you on this fine Wednesday?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
A lot of ball talk. We talked a lot of ball to prepare this episode, so that makes you happy on the inside and the outside. This is the KOTN midseason all-North team. We have 54 players from our 28 Northern teams. We have 12 defensive spots, first and second team, 13 offensive spots, first and second team, 2 special team spots, first and second team. You do the math, that's 54 players that we are going to run through, Landis, as the best of Northern football so far this season. It is a 14-week regular season with 2 off weeks for everybody. We are 7 weeks in. Mathematically, this is the midpoint. We also, at the end of the show, are going to acknowledge that there are 2 gigantic Southern games this week that you are allowed to watch. Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South will join us to talk about Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, and give us his 5 most dangerous Southern teams to the north. Plus, we didn't do Punt and Block on Tuesday. That means you get it here on Wednesday, and we'll do our quickly overrated Southern team of the week. But, Bill, this was a full-throated, we hashed it out. I've been on a couple of these in the past, like All-American calls for various, there's like 5 or 6 different All-American teams. But we did our version of that. It's just it was a 2-man panel instead of a 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20-person panel. I was on an All-American panel one time where everybody just kind of sat around and let Phil Steele pick the team because he puts out the best preseason magazine and he watches everybody. And if Phil Steele says, I really think there's a UTSA right guard who should be a 3rd-team All-American, who am I to disagree? So this
we don't have a Phil Steele here. Yeah.
What are we talking about? That's you, brother. I leaned, especially when we got to the offensive line. I was eating Panda during it. I was eating the hot blazing bourbon chicken. It's special. I think it's a limited time offer. The hot blazing bourbon chicken at Panda Express. 2 thumbs up. I got a double order of it, and I was shoving it in my face while you said, "Here's who the guard should be on the offensive line."
I was pretty jealous. I think I need to get myself some of that hot blazing bourbon chicken. Can I tell a quick story about why we didn't have Punt and Block yesterday? We're doing it today just to highlight how dumb I am, because I think it's funny.
Yeah. No, okay. but you're not dumb. It's just a lighthearted way of poking a little fun at yourself, Bill Landis.
Sure. Yeah. So like throughout the week, I just write myself a million like sticky notes to like make sure I don't forget to do things, and I put them on my computer, like on my laptop, and I use a wireless trackpad for my computer. But I still have the trackpad on my laptop, and I just had sticky notes all over it, and I didn't realize it. So like yesterday, I could not get my computer to function, and it took me all day to realize it was because I had sticky notes on my trackpad on my laptop that were keeping me from being able to do anything with my wireless trackpad. Like I thought my computer was broken. I was about to take it to the store, and then I just peeled the sticky note off my laptop, and I was like, okay, well, I'm a moron, but I'm glad my computer's not broken.
So that is a terrible. Shouldn't sticky notes be out of business? Because isn't Google Docs and the Notes app and your phone and your calendar, aren't those your digital sticky notes? Or you're still doing the actual stickies?
I'm a mix of analog and whatever the opposite of analog is. Digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the Google Docs, but I also have little notebooks filled with crap too. So I do both, and it got me in trouble.
You're a very complex person, but I'm glad your computer wasn't broken. I thought you were just gonna say I wrote down on a sticky note, "Do Punt and Block of the week," and then I threw the note away. And actually, that was a much more in-depth story than that. So, okay, so we'll have Punt and Block. Today, we'll have overrated Southern team, but let's dive in. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball, and we're going to start with quarterback first and talk this out a little bit. We did pick 2 for each spot, a first team and a second team. And, Bill, I thought trying to decide the quarterback spot for All North, I don't know. How many guys do you really think were sort of in consideration? I think you maybe could have gone maybe 7 or 8 deep with guys that you really could make a case for. But in the end, I think 4 stood out to us.
Yeah, I had 5 initially, and then I think you definitely could have extended that beyond those 5. I did find it pretty difficult because it's just a conversation about what you want to value, right? And then like, maybe one guy's really good in this area, but doesn't compare as well in another, then maybe you kind of revert back to just sort of what your eyes have told you through watching a lot of games. And I think that's kind of where we landed, because the guy that we did pick for the first team is like, he's not number one in everything statistically, but you kind of watch him play, and I think he sort of blows you away more than all the other quarterbacks in the North.
Yeah. So we'll run through the whole first and second team on the offense in a second, but I want to break off the quarterback discussion a little bit. In the end, who was the fifth guy? The four that we kind of honed in on. Who was the fifth guy for you initially that just didn't quite make the final cut?
Eli Holstein
from Pitt. Okay. Yeah. I think Rocco Becht from Iowa State, in his own way, could be in that conversation. I think the way that Jake Retzlaff has played for BYU, he could be in that conversation. I think Drew Aller from Penn State could be in that conversation. I think Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati could be in that conversation.
I thought Will Howard too, with the way he played against Oregon, was pretty impressive. Like, I think he took a jump. He took a jump in my mind a little bit.
And then there's a lot of guys who have had like really good moments. Max Brosmer at Minnesota has played very well at times. Thomas Castellano at Boston College has played very well in several games. Will Rogers at Washington has had some real moments. Billy Edwards at Maryland has had some real moments. I think overall, this has been kind of a running thing for a while. Big Ten football, Northern football, and not as much like the Pac-12, like Oregon, Washington kind of things, but really it was the case in the Big Ten for a long time, where the quarterback play just suffered. It was a defensive league. Guys would get propped up sometimes that weren't really there. I actually am fairly impressed with the overall level of quarterback play across our 28 teams.
I am too. If you think back to the exercise we did in the offseason, sort of like ranking the quarterback situations, right? And maybe just think about who was toward the bottom of that list. Like BYU was, I don't know if BYU was last, but it was close to last. And now we're talking about Jake Retzlaff as a guy who's been pretty impressive, right? Even Northwestern, which I think we definitely had low too, I think like has found something with Jack Lausch, right? The teams that were at the bottom, I think, have elevated themselves. And I'm not saying those guys are awesome, right? But I think the floor is much higher than I thought it was. And maybe the ceiling isn't quite as high than it has been. And that's maybe mostly an Ohio State conversation. But I think like the average quarterback play in the North is somewhat significantly better than I thought it would be.
And it's not a great year across the sport for college quarterbacks. So
right.
The guys that we're going to name as our top four here in a second, I would absolutely put up against Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck and Jalen Milroe and Garrett Nussmeier at LSU and Jackson Dart at Ole Miss and Cam Ward at Miami. I think some of those guys get puffed up a little bit. Like, you can miss me with some of the Garrett Nussmeier is the second coming of Tony Romo conversation, which feels where we are right now. Like, it's fine. I get it. But I would absolutely give these Northern quarterbacks a shot. And here are the four guys that we narrowed it down to for our first and second team. We have Kyle McCord at Syracuse, Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, Kurtis Rourke at Indiana, and Shadur Sanders at Colorado as our top four quarterbacks in the North. Kurtis Rourke and Dylan Gabriel are both leading undefeated teams. Syracuse is 5-1, and Colorado is 4-2. Kyle McCord has been chucking it around in that offense, Bill. So he has sort of the gaudiest statistics. 2,160 passing yards, Shadur Sanders, 2018. Dylan Gabriel, 1,790. Kurtis Rourke, 1,752. Kyle McCord, 19 touchdown passes, 6 picks. Shadur Sanders, 17 touchdown passes, 4 picks. Kurtis Rourke, 14 touchdown passes, 2 picks, and Dylan Gabriel, 13 touchdown passes, 3 picks. Gabriel, the best completion percentage, throws a lot more shorter passes. McCord airs it out a little bit more. He has the worst completion percentage among these four. You initially really liked the idea of McCord, and I understood why, right? Like the statistical case leads you to Kyle McCord, and also he's been transformative for the Syracuse football program.
He definitely has. The thing that pulled me back, which was, I think, a good point made by you and what you just kind of made there, is the reason his statistical case is so strong is because he throws the ball so much, right? I don't mean to use that necessarily as a knock against Kyle McCord, because part of the reason they're throwing the ball so much is because of how much Syracuse believes in Kyle McCord's ability to throw the ball, right? So I don't think it's a negative, but when you're just like lining up things like total touchdowns, total yards, I do think it take into account the fact that Kyle McCord, I think, has like 70 more pass attempts than anybody else we're comparing him to, but he has played really well. He's been a little loosey-goosey at times with the two, which I think factored into not picking him as well, but no doubt he's had a great season.
As we've talked about, he has the most big-time throws by PFF in major college football, and he also was tied for 6th in the most turnover-worthy plays. So he's a little boom bust, more boom than bust.
Yes.
Deserved to be in consideration, as did Dillon Gabriel, who is on, with the performance. He led his team to a victory in a 2-3 game. Like, that is, nobody is arguing with that. I thought Dillon Gabriel maybe was pretty good, a little iffy at times. He just had he had 3 weird picks in the previous 2 games before the Ohio State game. Conversations like, is he better than the Oregon quarterback last year, Bo Nix? Like, maybe not. He did everything he needed to do, though, Bill, against Ohio State when he was 23 of 34 for 341 yards, 2 touchdowns, a really key touchdown run, no interceptions. But he didn't quite make it for us, and I don't think we need to apologize for that. And we're halfway. So it's a small data set. If he winds up being the starting quarterback for the undefeated number 1 or number 2 team in the country by the end of the year and continues to do what he does, the way he played against Ohio State, I think we'll be having a different conversation for our end of the year KOTN All-North team. But he is not a first or second teamer for us right now.
He's not. The whole body of work counts, right? His Ohio State game was great. He threw the ball down the field more than he had previously this year. You mentioned the rushing touchdown. He has good rushing production, I think, overall, compared to some other quarterbacks in the North. But we did try to take the totality of the season into account and not just the most recent performance. But yeah, if Dillon Gabriel stays on this trajectory, then he will very much be in the conversation for our first team guy, and I like a Heisman Trophy guy, I think, for 2.
Yeah. So, and again, to me, and we'll have our Kings of the North top 5 ballot later. Again, this is our version of the Northern Heisman, voted on by a panel of 2. Someday we'll have a larger panel. But I even think of that. I think people know my thinking about something like that. To me, the Heisman is a story of the season, how you mattered to college football that year. And I would consider that the same for the King of the North. How good your team is, how important you are to your team matters more there. Where to me, like a All-North team is sort of just about you. And I'm winning matters, but it doesn't matter quite as much as it does to me for the King of the North Northern Heisman Award. So that means the 2 guys left that we picked as our first and second team quarterbacks are Shedeur Sanders of Colorado and Kurtis Rourke of Indiana. And we have Shedeur Sanders as the first team All-North quarterback. 172 of 237, 2,018 yards, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. You watch him. He still does kind of a lot on his own, Landis, to keep plays alive, look downfield. He does have a nice array of receivers to throw to. A lot of them got hurt in the last game against Kansas State, and he still punched in after a great play by the Colorado defense, punched in a go-ahead score in the final minutes before Kansas State came back. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. This is not an NFL projection pick, but you see the talent, and 4-2 for Colorado is actually better than a lot of people thought. So I think I'm very confident in Sanders as our first-team QB.
I am too. For me, it just kind of came down to the volume of passing for Shedeur Sanders. I think the degree of difficulty with some of the throws that he makes, and the fact that he has all that going on and does not put the ball in harm's way. 17-4 touchdown to interception ratio, 16-3 big time throw to turnover worthy play ratio, which I think is like a pretty good way to kind of study the effectiveness of quarterbacks. And I just like, you watch him every week. He makes throws that I don't know how many guys in the country can make the throws. Certainly, like no offense to the other quarterbacks in the North. I just don't know that there are a lot of quarterbacks in the North that can make the throws that Shedeur Sanders makes on a routine basis.
Similar stats to Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord has more loose plays. So that's the defining thing. They're both transformative for teams that are very good but not great. They both have gaudy stats. Shedeur Sanders, while doing all that, takes care of the ball a little bit better than Kyle McCord. So if you're looking for where we spliced it, I think that's how we spliced it. And then I think we feel really good about Kurtis Rourke leading 6-0 Indiana, 14 touchdowns, 2 picks. He basically has had one bad half in the first half against Maryland, and they wound up coming back and winning that game. Otherwise, he is the engine of what Curt Cignetti and the Hoosiers are doing. And it's not just like a try-hard engine. It's like a productive stats engine too. And he does just throw it a lot less than these other guys. He has more than 100 fewer attempts through 6 games than Kyle McCord, for instance. But he's still throwing for, 250 a game. So I feel really good about Kurtis Rourke as our second team QB.
They've had some blowouts too that I think have limited, right, the amount of passes he would be throwing otherwise. He is a guy who was MAC Player of the Year a couple years ago, and I think he's just kind of back to that form, and he's doing it on a much bigger stage against more difficult competition so far. He's number 1 in the country in EPA per dropback, and Indiana is number 3 in the country in passing efficiency, behind only Army and Navy, who don't really throw the ball all that much. So it's basically the best passing offense in the country, and Kurtis Rourke is the guy who's leading it.
Yeah, I like almost when you really they're 6-0, and then when you dive into the efficiency stats like that, it's almost a slam dunk. It's sort of like, well, you have to have Kurtis Rourke on one of your first 2 teams, and then who else, right? I mean, like that's people may not know that, but we've done some various quarterback rankings with you during the course of the season. You've had Kurtis Rourke very high the whole time, and he's continued to be that. So that's where we are. Those are our quarterbacks. Send your complaints to @BillLandis25 on Twitter. Let's run through the rest of the first team offense and then the rest of the second team offense. And then we'll double back and have some discussions about individual position groups and how we wound up where we did. All right. First team offense at running back, Caleb Johnson of Iowa and DJ Giddens of Kansas State. A quick note. For this team, for the first and second teams, we only considered players from our official 28 Northern teams who are the power conference teams in the North as defined by us. That does not include group of 5 teams. For the King of the North, Northern Heisman, that is open to anybody who plays in the North, and that includes Ashton Jeanty of Boise State. So we will have a Jeanty conversation later. We did not include him for this because we just don't break down Boise State the same way we do these other 28 teams, Bill. And again, I don't think we have to apologize for that. But if we're handing out a fake sword at the end of the year and he's the best guy, we will give it to him. He's just not going to be in this mix.
Yeah, I like the way that you put it earlier in the show, like treating the King of the North, Northern Heisman, more about the narrative of the season than necessarily, bonkers individual accomplishment.
Yes. So, and we watch the 28 teams that we have as our Northern teams. We watch, we study, we dive in on them every week, Bill, and we just don't do that with Boise. So that's why we kept it to these 28 guys. So Caleb Johnson and DJ Giddens at running back. Receiver, we did 3 receivers. Ty Felton, the statistical leader of everything from Maryland as a receiver. Jeremiah Smith, the freshman from Ohio State, and Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. There were some tough cuts here, Bill, at the receiver spot. Again, we like the talent at receiver. We have an all-purpose spot on offense just to really get another great guy in. This guy absolutely had to be first team all North. If we did not have an all-purpose spot, we would have made him a running back. It's Des Reed of Pitt, and he's all-purpose because he catches it as well as he runs it. He's awesome. And we will talk more about him later. He's our first team all-purpose. First team tight end, kind of the Des Reed of tight ends. He does everything. It's Tyler Warren at Penn State. Our first team offensive line, the tackles, Wyatt Milam from West Virginia and Johnny Cornelius from Oregon. The guards, Vega Ione from Penn State and Luke Kandra from Cincinnati. And the center, we won't apologize. He earned it, and we love him. Mike Kadick of Indiana. When we sat down with the guy at Big Ten Media Days, Bill, who told us people tell him he looks like a cross between John Candy, the local plumber, and James Corden, and we loved him. I'm not sure that we thought halfway through the season we were going to be talking about him as an all-North pick for an undefeated team.
I did not have that in my mind when we were talking to him. No, all of it. Not that he would be first team, not that Indiana would be undefeated. None of it.
No,
but he earned it. He earned it with his play.
He earned it.
It's maybe he got some bonus points because we like him and he's our guy, but it's not like he's had a bad season. He's had a very good season on a very good Indiana offensive line.
Yeah, and again, Indiana's offensive line has been a driver of their success. And as a 6th-year guy who changed positions this year and is one of the highest graded centers in the country, he's a driver of their success. So we're not apologizing for that. We're not playing favorites. Dominic Zvada from Michigan is the kicker, first-team kicker. Okay, let's run through the second team. Very quickly, again, this is the second team all-North offense led by the quarterback, Kurtis Rourke at running back, Jonah Coleman of Washington, and Kyle Monangai of Rutgers. The receivers, Emeka Ibuka of Ohio State, Denzel Boston of Washington. Like I can call him my guy, right, Bill?
Yeah.
I was talking this guy up in the spring. I love Denzel Boston. touchdown machine, and Tez Johnson of Oregon. And I got to tell you, like some tough cuts there. Jalen Noel of Iowa State, like a couple other guys, like right on the edge. Good receivers in the north. All purpose, Nick Singleton from Penn State, the running back, who also catches it really well out of the backfield. He's the second team all purpose. Second team tight end. You've been talking about how good the tight ends in the north are, Bill. We went with Orande Gadsden of Syracuse, and that was a tough decision as well. Multiple guys could have gotten that spot, right?
Yeah, that was a really tough decision. And Orande Gadsden had a little bit of a lull kind of in the middle portion of the season, but he's picked it back up. He is maybe the best receiving tight end in the north.
Yeah.
He or Colston Loveland, I think, are the best receiving tight ends in the north.
And Colston Loveland, I think, unanimously viewed as the best tight end in the country coming in. Missed a game with injury and doesn't have a quarterback. So like that affects him. It doesn't mean we don't think Colston Loveland's good. There's a lot of good tight ends. Second team offensive line, the tackles, Carter Smith from Indiana and Jack Nelson from Wisconsin. The guards, Michael Ford Jr. of Kansas, Josh Thompson of Northwestern, and the center, Seth McLaughlin of Ohio State. The second team kicker is Jonathan Kim of Michigan State. Okay, let's dive in now to the position breakdowns here, the running backs, Bill. That we wound up with Caleb Johnson, DJ Giddens, Jonah Coleman, and Kyle Monungai. And then we did work in two other running backs in Des Reed and Nick Singleton. One of the reasons, and again, it's like we invented the North. Literally nobody can argue with us because there's nobody else looks at college football this way. Ashton Jeanty would have taken a running back spot and just would have knocked a good back off here. Like we're tipping the cap to Ashton Jeanty, but there were too many good backs, Bill. I feel really good about the running back spot in the North.
I feel good about it, but this was a difficult choice too, because like there are some really good players we didn't pick Kalel Mullings, who's had a great year, right?
Yes.
All of Indiana's guys, kind of like a three-headed monster they have there. They've all been good. We don't have an Ohio State running back on here, right? So we had to pick four. I mean, we could go, I think we can make 6 teams of 2 running backs and feel pretty good about what we're doing, right? That's how good this position has been. But I like the 4 that we landed on. And of course, it comes with the caveat, I guess, of not having Ashton Jeanty available. But it's not like all 4 of these guys are deserving. All 4 of these guys have been among the best running backs in the country.
The 4 that we picked at running back are the 4 leading rushers in the North of our 28 teams.
Yes.
Caleb Johnson 1, DJ Giddens 2, Kyle Monungai 3, Jonah Coleman 4. Mekhi Bernard from Utah, Jordan James from Oregon. You mentioned Mullings, Devin Neal from Kansas, Corey Kiner from Cincinnati, LaQuint Allen from Syracuse. Tyree Walker from Wisconsin has really come on. Darius Taylor, when he's healthy at Minnesota, has absolutely been clutch for them at times. Like almost, I'd say about 2/3 of the teams of our 28 teams in the North have like a back that they love.
I think that's right. Yep,
which is great.
I agree. They have running backs that I love. I know that much.
Yeah,
so I hope they love them too.
So we got 6 of them in because we have Des Reed and Nick Singleton at all purpose. So like we are just feeling good about that, and we're feeling almost as good about receiver. We've mentioned this stat a couple times. This is not true anymore. It was true a couple weeks ago. There are only 3 teams in the country, I think, after 5 games, that had 2 receivers with 400 receiving yards. And it was Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins at Iowa State, Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, and Denzel Boston and Giles Jackson at Washington. So we wound up putting both Ohio State guys on, Jeremiah Smith on the first team, Emeka Egbuka on the second team. We put Jaden Higgins from Iowa State on the first team. Jalen Noel, I think, was probably our 7th receiver. And then Giles Jackson from Washington didn't make it, but Denzel Boston made the second team. Like those pairs definitely catch our eye. But again, I just think sometimes people believe this is where, with some of the skill position stuff, the North falls short a little bit. I don't think they're falling short this year, man.
I don't think they're falling short. Illinois has awesome receivers. Syracuse has awesome receivers. Pitt, I think, has really good receivers, right? Like
Indiana has good receivers.
Indiana has great receivers.
Elijah Surratt is 7th in the North in receiving yards. And like we thought about him, absolutely.
And like multiple, like not just teams that have like only one guy, right there. I think that's
Jackson
been
at Minnesota, Pat Bryant, Illinois, Dorian Singer from Utah, Bryce Kurtz from Northwestern has come on of late. Chase Roberts from BYU has made some huge catches, like everywhere, man.
We knew that Oregon and Ohio State and Iowa State were going to have good receivers, right? But I think maybe similar to quarterback, the receiver talent in other places in the North has been a bit of a pleasant surprise for me. There are real game breakers, I think, all across the 28 teams that we talk about.
I don't know that anybody would question us having a true freshman in Jeremiah Smith on our first team. Just so people know, he is second in the north of our 28 teams in receiving yards. Ty Felton from Maryland, who was the first guy we put down, has 714. Jeremiah Smith has 549, and he also has 7 touchdown catches, which is tied for second with Pat Bryant and LeJontay Wester from Colorado, behind Denzel Boston, who has 9. So and none of the Colorado almost has too many guys at receiver. And by the way, you didn't hear the name Travis Hunter on offense. We put him on defense. I don't know what the right way is to handle Travis Hunter. We talked about putting Travis Hunter on the offensive team and the defensive team.
We did, but we have too many good receivers. I just would feel bad, right? And not he has earned it. I was going back and look at some of the numbers this morning. It's Travis Hunter has a definite case to be a first team receiver.
Yeah. So if you're looking for him, we're gonna get to him. But I again feel really good about this group. I will say Jeremiah Smith was a no-brainer, right? We've seen it, the highlight plays. Ohio State does focus on getting him the ball in certain situations. It feels like, I don't know through 6 games that has there been, I guess he had a bit of a slow first half against Iowa. I think he had 4 catches for 19 yards in the first half against Iowa, but they've done a pretty good job of making sure he's involved, whether it's quick slant or RPO stuff, hit him short and let him go crazy, whether it's trying some stuff down the field. When you have a talent like that, you work him in, and he's been pretty consistent. It's not just flashes. It's he's a primary part of what they do.
Oh, yeah. And he is, they have 2 go-to guys, I think. And sometimes I think it is a little hard to really put the number 1 label on either him or Emeka Egbuka in that offense. But it was from the start of the season, we talked about it, right? When Will Howard needs to get a play made, he often looks toward Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah. And so the guy, I was not 100% sold on my initial ballot going in on whether Emeka Egbuka had to be on this team, but you were pretty solid on that. I think it's the right decision to have him on. He is 6th in the North with 526 receiving yards, and he has 6 touchdowns, which is tied for 5th in the North. I think it's possible to have Emeka Egbuka behind the crazy freshman slide through the cracks a little bit, and we didn't let that happen.
No, he's also 4th in yards after the catch. He's a weapon in that regard. He's also so versatile, right? He's among the more versatile players in the country, and I think we will see more of that moving forward. I think he'll be more involved in Ohio State's run game than he has been already. But he'll play receiver, he'll play running back. He blocks really well too. There's a lot to his game. I absolutely thought he should have been here.
Okay. At tight end, it's definitely Tyler Warren. And then, why is it Tyler Warren? Tell everybody why everybody loves Tyler Warren so much all of a sudden.
You want to talk about versatility? He plays quarterback. He plays running back. He plays tight end. He snapped the ball against USC. It's just I don't know that there is a team in the country doing more things with more fun things with an individual player than what Penn State is doing with Tyler Warren. And Tyler Warren can handle all of it. He's not run by you, break you down in the open field type of receiver, but he's really sure-handed. He's strong in a contested catch situation. He's super athletic. He's a pretty good blocker, I think, too. I don't think the PFF grades bear that out, but from what I've watched, I think he's a pretty good blocker. He's just an all-around tight end who I think is also kind of an exceptional athlete for the position with all the things he can do.
He leads the North among tight ends with 513 receiving yards. Second is Orande Gadsden with 433 receiving yards, and he did make it as our second team tight end. I was very interested in Joe Royer of Cincinnati, who was 4th in the North with 347 receiving yards. I do feel like Royer is a primary part. He's clearly it's Xavier Henderson or Joe Royer when they throw the ball at Cincinnati, and they've been talking him up. They talked him up in the preseason, the Ohio State transfer, and he's lived up to that. And he's been really consistent. He just down to down, game to game. He's super important to what Cincinnati does. And Cincinnati, by the way, I don't love this. Apparently Lincoln Riley is doing this. And I think Joel Klatt was repeating it, that Lincoln Riley was USC's 4 plays away from being 6-0. They're 3-3. So Lincoln Riley can cram it. But Cincinnati, if we're going to play that game, Cincinnati is closer to 6-0 than USC is. And Joe Royer I don't think there were guarantees with that offense coming in. He is so important to what they do. And I was very torn on this, Bill. I'm great with Gadsden, but man, I thought Joe Royer was right there.
He had a great case. I think there's probably 4 or 5 guys that had a pretty compelling case for that second spot. Orande, Gadsden, and Joe Royer are 2 of them. I think Terrence Ferguson in Oregon definitely had a claim to it. Brant Keithy is healthy and I think playing well for Utah's offense. And then even though he did miss a game in his production, he was not quite what we thought it was going to be, Colston Loveland, I think, was still part of that conversation too. So
absolutely,
I would have been okay with Royer as well, because he's also, in addition to being productive, he's, like, to your point, he's come up in some big spots for Cincinnati as well, which I think matters. So Royer, like, we're going to do this again, right? And I think Royer will continue to be a part of that conversation.
Max Clare from Purdue, also a guy you really like, 352 receiving yards. He's 3rd among Northern tight ends. Royer is 4th at 347. We will say this. I mean, this was intentional. This is often how this stuff kind of works. If we could do it, we wanted to get a guy from every team. And we did. So these 54 players, are they absolutely slam dunk, the 54 best players? No doubt about it. That's it. We're probably a little short of that. We probably it sometimes tried to lean a little bit. Well, if we did this, we can get this guy in and that way. So we have all of our 28 teams have at least one guy. Penn State has 5. They lead. Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan have 4 players on our teams. Iowa and Indiana have 3. Pitt, BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas State, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Washington, and Michigan State have 2. And then 1 from Syracuse, Boston College, Notre Dame, Utah, Kansas, Nebraska, Minnesota, Northwestern, Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, Maryland, and Rutgers. Orande Gadsden's our Syracuse rep. They're 5-1. What are we going to do? There's not necessarily like a defensive guy at Syracuse that stands out, and they do spread the ball around. And LaQuint Allen at running back is just up against a log jam, and we didn't pick McCord. And so
Trevor Pena too is good, but also there's a lot of good receivers. Yeah.
So you get to the point where it's like, what are we doing? And so it's like, okay, Gadsden earned it, but also somebody has to rep Syracuse, and that did factor in there a little bit, just to be transparent, right?
Yeah, it did. And if that train of thought impacted a couple of other spots too. Again, we didn't want to pick guys who were undeserving just to have representation, but if it was on the fence and we didn't have a team represented, I think we did lean toward that a little bit.
Yeah, and we don't apologize for it because we love everybody. Don't we?
Right.
We love all our Northern teams. All right. Yeah. Tackle. How did we figure out tackle? We went with Wyatt Milam, and like left and right tackle. It's great if like the left on the first team, Wyatt Milam is the first team left tackle. Johnny Cornelius is the first team right tackle. That's the position they actually play. But we just threw them in a pot, all the tackles together. Carter Smith and Jack Nelson were the other 2 tackles. Wyatt Milam by PFF is the highest graded Northern tackle. So that we started off by saying Wyatt Milam is definitely a first teamer from West Virginia, right?
Yeah, he was among the slam dunkiest of the slam dunks I think we had in this entire exercise. He's playing like one of the best tackles in the country. The grades bear that out. I think if you watch West Virginia play, you would be pretty impressed with what he does, both run blocking and pass blocking. He's just an excellent tackle. He doesn't get talked about in the same conversations as like Kelvin Banks at Texas and Will Campbell at LSU and some other guys around the country. And maybe he's not quite as athletic as those guys, but I think he is playing as well as them this year.
Yeah. According to PFF, no pressures allowed this year at left tackle. So that was huge. And I don't know if there's heat on this. I really kind of push for a Johnny Cornelius at right tackle. The grades at PFF do not bear it out. He had a bad grade. Again, like he had a bad grade by PFF against Ohio State. I'm not sure watching that game. Did you think to yourself like Johnny Cornelius is having a bad game? I thought Dylan Gabriel kind of had the time to do what he wanted to do in that game.
No, I thought both tackles played really well in that game. Yeah.
Yeah. And Josh Connerly, certainly coming into the season, we talked about does Oregon have the best tackle tandem in the country with Josh Connerly and Johnny Cornelius? I think Connerly had some more off games early on. So this is not, and again, let's just be honest again. Landis is a pretty high up there when it comes to holistic offensive line play evaluation of people who do this, right? You are not a professional offensive lineman, but other than that, like, you know this as well as anybody, but you wind up looking at PFF for this stuff. So did we watch every snap of all the 60 tackles in the mix here? No, Cornelius is 16th in the PFF ratings. No, fifth, tied for 15th in the PFF ratings in the North at tackle. I think he's good. I'm fine. I like him. I'm not fine. I push for it. I like him being our right tackle on the first team.
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with it. I didn't push back on it too much. There are guys who have higher grades. There are guys who I've been pretty impressed with, like Holland Pierce at Rutgers. We don't have on here at all. I think when I've watched Rutgers, he's jumped out to me as someone who's played really well. Jennings Dunker at Iowa is another guy who has really jumped out to me when I watched Iowa play, and he's not on our team either. But it's like,
and we did talk about him a lot. I think he was right there in the mix.
Yeah, but I like our first team tackles. I like our second team tackles. I think Carter Smith is a really interesting story at Indiana, as someone who was going to transfer out of that program and then jump back in the boat when Kurt Signetti got there. And he's another guy who's playing like one of the better tackles not only in the North but in the country. I think also maybe has not given up a pressure this year. So we had a lot of good players to choose from, but I'm okay with leaning a little more toward acknowledging the improvement on Oregon's offensive line too, and doing that through picking a guy like a Johnny Cornelius.
And then Jack Nelson from Wisconsin is a 4-year starter, has a body of work, is excellent at what he does, and represents Wisconsin on this team. So that was like the fourth tackle. We had long tackle conversations. We could have just run it. We didn't even have to record a podcast, Landis. We could have just recorded the discussion we had initially making the team and let people listen to the 14-minute discussion we had about who the fourth tackle should be. I'm not sure if that's good podcasting and good YouTubing. So we're doing this instead. But it wasn't that we couldn't find tackles, is that we had too many.
Yeah, I think that's right. It was a little more clear cut, I thought, at the other offensive line positions, but tackle was a little hard to sort through some good options.
So the guards, why did we land on the guards that we landed on with, am I saying it right? Venga
Owane, I think.
That's right. We double checked the pronunciation on that, and then I forgot it.
Yeah.
Venga Owane from Penn State and Luke Kandra from Cincinnati. Luke Kandra was on our preseason team at the starting guards, second team guards, Michael Ford Jr. The Kansas rep. Kansas is having an unfortunate season. He's still a really good player. Then Josh Thompson from Northwestern. We wanted to represent Northwestern. We had a different Northwestern guy. Josh Thompson's played well, you thought there. So those are our guards.
Yeah, I think Michael Ford is also, I believe, the highest graded guard in the North. Or maybe he's second. So it's not merely a Kansas representation there, though that did help. Josh Thompson got definitely a nod. His grades are good comparatively, like they stack up, but we wanted to have somebody from Northwestern. Luke Kandra is just like a stalwart in this exercise for us, right? We had him last year. We had him coming into this year. He is one of the best guards in the country, and he just consistently plays like it. And then Venga Owane, I think, has broken out a little bit, and it helps him that Andy Koltelnicki uses him as a slot receiver who pulls across the formation sometimes, and I highlighted that on Block of the Week a couple weeks ago. But when he's also lined up with his hand on the ground playing left guard, he's pretty good at that too. So he's a monster. He's 350 pounds, just a people mover in the middle of Penn State's offensive line.
PFF grades among Northern guards. The top two are Luke Kandra and Michael Ford Jr. Venga Owane is number 4 and Josh Thompson is number 6. So those are our 4 guys. So like we feel good about that. And then at center, Mike Kadick, and then Seth McLaughlin. We probably had maybe 5 centers we really talked about for these 2 spots.
Yeah, we were looking at Drew Kendall, right, from BC. The Logan Jones at Iowa was pretty good too. Bryce Foster at Kansas, I think, is having a nice year. I have watched Seth McLaughlin probably more than any center in the North, and I have found his play really impressive. Because I was on alert for it not to be. Maybe, and that's like he's getting a bonus for that as well. But he's played really well for Ohio State, and I think the last game against Oregon notwithstanding, I think he's helped settle that offensive line a little bit, and it needed it.
Kickers, Dominic Zavada of Michigan and Jonathan Kim of Michigan State. They just they make stuff. Is that the deal? They make kicks?
They do. Zavada's perfect on the year, and he's 4 for 4 on field goals at 50+ yards. So
that'll do it.
Yeah.
All right. That's the offense. Quick break. When we come back, we will get to the defensive side of the ball, and then we'll get to our ballots for the King of the North, Northern Heisman. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises. Bill Landis back on Kings of the North. This is a lot of serious ball talk, Landis. Is that okay with everybody? Are people enjoying the serious ball talk? We're naming people.
I hope so. Yeah.
We're not doing what you're watching, what you're eating, what you're thinking on this episode this week because there's so much serious ball talk, and then we want to get to the Southern games. But I did just watch a movie last night that is about something that's supposed to be fun, and I found it exceedingly tedious. So hold on a second. Now I'm getting worried about this. Woo! Hey, Doug's got a sword. Hey, Kirby Smart shoved the player. Woo! We're crazy. Okay, is that all right? I don't want to be tedious.
It's not tedious. It's ball talk.
It's ball talk. We want to be a mix. Defense. Let's run through the first team and offense. First team and second team defense for the Kings of the North, all North midseason team. Defensive ends. Donovan Ezaraku, he was on the show. He also was like leading the North in sacks, so that's a big deal. And Josiah Stewart, who we talked about on a show previously, we just think is like being super impactful at Michigan. So BC and Michigan get the 2 defensive end spots. Derrick Harmon at Oregon, who might have been the best player in the Ohio State-Oregon game. I felt like watching Oregon this season, I could not believe how good he was, and I thought he showed up in that game. He was another absolute, one of the dunkiest slam dunk first team picks, right, Landis? Derrick Harmon?
Yeah, he's like Lombardi Award kind of guy. I think with the way he's playing, right? He's one of the best players in the country right now.
He's destroying offensive lines. And then Zane Durant from Penn State, who's played really well. They're the first team defensive tackles, only picking 2 linebacker spots. Jay Higgins is as rock solid as it gets at Iowa. He was an obvious first team linebacker. And then we went with Kyle Lewis at Pitt Pat Narduzzi said that guy should be an first team all ACC. Write it down, right? So we listened to Nardog and we wrote it down for All North.
We did. When Nardog speaks, we listen.
Absolutely. 3 corners: Xavier Scott from Illinois, playmaker. Will Johnson from Michigan, playmaker. Travis Hunter from Colorado. We could have put him at quarterback if we just obviously he's a first team something. So first team cornerback, we feel good about that. The safeties: Caleb Downs from Ohio State and Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, and the punter Jack Bomeister from Utah. Let's do the second team defense. Defensive ends on the second team defense. Your guy Abdul Carter from Penn State, who has been good, not great, but getting towards great, right? Like coming on, could be a first teamer by the end of the year, maybe, Landis?
Yeah, I think starting to ramp up a little bit. Just he doesn't have the sack production clearly that I was anticipating, but I don't really think that anyone was anticipating. But he's played well. He's still getting after quarterbacks. He's played the run well, so he's having a good year.
Tyler Batty from BYU as our other defensive end. The defensive tackles, I think these guys might have been the first team tackles in the preseason, but Dante Corleone had the blood clot issue in the summer, only ended up missing 1 game, which is great, and has been awesome for Cincinnati since he came back. So he's a second teamer. And then Mason Graham, who was, I think, viewed as the best defensive tackle in the country coming into the year. And I don't really know that there's much that has happened that would change that conversation. It's just we have 2 other guys who we think really stood out ahead of him. So he's a second teamer. John Bullock from Nebraska and Josiah Trotter from West Virginia, son of the great Eagles linebacker Jeremiah Trotter. It's okay if you say that, Landis. You can say it.
That's right. Go Birds.
Go Birds. They are the 2 linebackers. The corners: Jacob Robinson from BYU, Jamari Harris from Iowa, and Jabbar Muhammad from Oregon. The safeties: Jeremiah Cooper from Iowa State, and the true freshman Coy Parrish from Minnesota, who has 4 picks and isn't really a starter necessarily, and didn't play that much early in the year, but is like, what is happening? All over the place guy who's made some big plays at the end of the games, and you can just see the talent. So we're not apologizing for putting Coy Parrish on as a true freshman.
No, I think when we set out to do this, I said, I'm not sure what to do with this guy because he's awesome, but he hasn't played a lot and he hasn't been a starter all year. But he's like a starter now, and he's making big time plays, also on special teams, not just on defense. He is, I was looking this up earlier, Coy Parrish, among every defensive player who has played a snap in Power 4, Coy Parrish is the 7th highest defensive grade in the country. As a true freshman safety at Minnesota.
He's nuts. He's nuts, man. And this was a guy who, like, late in the recruiting process, everybody wanted to come steal. He's a Minnesota kid who stuck with Minnesota, and they're putting him on the field, and he's making plays, and they're winning games. And then Ryan Eckley of Michigan State's the punter. So let's double back now, have a little bit more in-depth conversations. We'll start on the defensive line with Ezeraku and Stewart at defensive end. Donovan Ezeraku, again, when we start getting into discussions about most impactful sack dudes in the country, like All-American defensive award status, like this guy is at that level. First round pick discussion, right? This guy's doing everything you want from a big time defensive end at this point for Boston College.
Yeah, he leads the Power 4 in sacks, right? There's a guy in the G5, I think, who has one more than Donovan Ezeraku does, but he has 9 sacks. He got a bunch of pressures. He's a game wrecker, I think, a little bit for that Boston College defense. He did have the one game. Was that Virginia? What was the game we had him on, like, right after that? You were running through the plays with him when he was, like, going through what he was.
Western
process
Kentucky
was Western Kentucky, right? He had 3 sacks
when they were losing to Western Kentucky, and he had 3 sacks, including a strip sack at the end that got the ball back for Boston College to go in for the winning score.
Yeah, and that was just like, you want to know what Donovan Ezeraku is all about. Just like watch those 3 sacks, like, because the way he went about all 3 of them was different too.
Yeah, tremendous skill. Second in pressures among edge guys in the North, like slam dunk, no doubt about it. And then PFF, the highest graded edge guy in the North is Josiah Stewart. And he did miss a game. Is that even better than that in the country?
I think he might be the highest graded defender in the country.
Okay. So that's good. Which is that a good thing to say about a player?
It's pretty good. He's like, he doesn't have quite the sack production of Ezeraku, but it's not like he's been bad there. He's been excellent against the run. And he, like, I know people don't always love this stat or whatever, but for whatever it's worth, he is number 1 in pass rush win rate. So even if he's not getting the sacks, he is winning his one-on-one battles when he is pass rushing.
Okay. And then Carter and Batty, who make the second team. Who else were the guys who were kind of in this discussion here for us when we were trying to figure out who our defensive end edge guys were going to be?
Yeah, another deep group, I thought. TJ Jackson at West Virginia might have been the most difficult one to leave off for me. He's just been kind of filling the stat sheet and been a really impactful transfer for them after coming over from Troy. Mikal Kamara at Indiana, another transfer, has been really good. Ja Joyner at Minnesota was a guy that I had on my list. Van Fillinger at Utah was another. And then I think, like, the Ohio State's defensive line didn't play great against Oregon. I think Jack Sawyer's had a decent year, so he was kind of on the periphery of it for me. But there were probably 5 or 6 other guys we could have considered.
Okay, defensive tackle. Did we zero in on defensive tackle maybe a little bit more? Because I like Harmon, Durant, Graham, and Corleone. That is hard to argue with in my mind a little bit.
You can look up some stuff like that. I like the PFF stops metric they have. Cam Horsley from Boston College, shows up pretty well there. Tyleik Williams at Ohio State is a really good player. I like Aaron Graves at Iowa a lot. Junior Tafuna at Utah is a good player. But even with all that being said, I do kind of think that these 4 were quite obvious, and that the first team was obvious as well.
And I think Aaron Graves was probably the 5th guy from Iowa that you really did like him. And he was the guy who probably was the strongest in the discussion. But it's one of those where Harmon and Durant have played great, and Graham and Corleone, with the body of work, the way they were correctly perceived coming into the year, and they have done nothing, I think, to lose any of the confidence people have in them. That's just a hard top 4 to break through. We thought about doing 3 linebackers, but actually we were searching a little bit at linebacker, which is why we were okay with only doing 2 spots here. After Jay Higgins, it was kind of a let's try to figure out where we should go.
Yeah, and that list got kind of long of who we could go with after Jay Higgins. I think we landed on the right guy with Kyle Lewis and the season he's having, and then Pat Narduzzi, stumping form really helped too. I think that solidified it for him. Like Josiah Trotter's had a really good season at West Virginia too. And John Bullock likewise at Nebraska. There were like Aiden Fisher at Indiana, and Kobe King at Penn State, and Austin Romaine at Kansas State. Like there are more than a handful of guys that probably compare pretty well to everyone else we were considering aside from Jay Higgins. So maybe people have some stronger feelings on who should be there. But I think we got the right guys again. At least I think we got the right first team guys, and then there's probably some more wiggle room with the second team.
Yeah, there was a Jack Kelly conversation from BYU early on. He had that crazy game, like the second week of the year. He had 8 pressures against SMU and kind of went bonkers. But I think we wound up with the right guys. Corner, Hunter was obvious. Xavier Scott as a playmaker on that Illinois defense was obvious, right? Like it didn't take us long to get to those two, right?
Yeah, he's got 3 picks. Like just good sort of like, ball production as a cornerback. And there's not a whole lot of that. So he jumped out to me as a playmaker. And like same thing with Will Johnson. Like early on in the year, it felt like people were maybe like starting to get a little out on Will Johnson because I think he was playing a little too aggressively and at times putting himself in a bad spot, but then he's also looked like kind of won games with making crazy interceptions.
Yeah.
So I still think he's a really good corner. I know a lot of people do. So I thought the only guy that we didn't have on our first team that I thought had a really strong claim for it, and we put him on the second team, was Jermari Harris at Iowa.
Yeah.
He's just not giving up a whole lot. He's been in coverage a lot. He hasn't been penalized. I have the stats for Jermari Harris. He has been targeted 27 times. He's only allowed 10 receptions for 138 yards and no touchdowns.
Yeah. Highest graded corner overall by PFF in the North.
Yeah.
And went up on our second team. Will Johnson is 18th in PFF grade, but again, like that's not the end all be all. It's a guide for some things, right. But I don't think we're controversial by putting Will Johnson on our first team. Jermari Harris, definitely a second teamer. Jacob Robinson, playmaker at BYU. Just the last game had the blitz where he jumped, tipped the pass to himself, caught it, and just as like I think was an example of the way he's made plays. And then again, this is not PFF grade. I just thought like Jabbar Muhammad in the Ohio State game for Oregon is just like an example of what you can do when you have a number one corner that you believe in. And I think it permeates everything Oregon does on the back end. So I don't necessarily care as much like what Jabbar Muhammad's grades are. I think that guy's presence on the field is so important for what Oregon does. And Brandon Johnson's played well in the back end for them too. But I just think they'd be a different team if they didn't have Jabbar Muhammad.
No, I think so too. I think, especially in a remade secondary, I think his presence there kind of helps keep them a little tied together.
And body of work matters. Like the guy's done it previously at Washington. He's 26th in the North in grades among corners by PFF. But like again, that's not the end all be all. So was there anybody? Who were the guys? Oh, we did talk about AJ Harris at Penn State, who did not make it. But again, Penn State has 5 guys. They have more than any other team. So when we got into some tiebreakers with other Penn State guys, it's like, okay. But transfer from Georgia, 5-star recruit, thought he would really matter to Penn State and has.
Yeah, he's been good. The secondary's been good.
Yes.
We ended up not having anybody from Penn State secondary here, but it's a really good secondary. You also liked John Tez Williams at Iowa State. You were talking about him a lot. Yeah.
And I couldn't Matt Campbell really likes John Tez Williams. He's had some big picks lately. He's a great story, kind of coming from off the radar, next in line, sort of like the great Iowa State corners. Has learned a lot. There was a story I read that, learning from TJ Tampa, who went on to the NFL last year, like all of that, like just a little bit on the outside looking in. So again, I thought we had a pretty good group of corners to choose from. And I thought the Ohio State secondary, maybe coming into the year, was in the conversations, the best secondary in the country. And then their corners did not play that well against Oregon, especially Denzel Burke, who before the Oregon game would have been in the mix for this.
Yeah, that is maybe the most surprising thing of this entire exercise. And part of it is we do want to be representative, I guess. But for all the talk about Ohio State's defense coming into the year, we have one defensive player from Ohio State on either.
But the thing is, I had a I don't know what I was on like an Oregon radio show before that game, and they were asking me about like the NFL talent, and I was trying to say like it is with Ohio State. It's not like the 2015 Ohio State team was filled with first rounders, like the Joey Bosa or like that level of like slam dunk. No doubt, there are many good. They have a lot of third rounders, I think.
Yeah. Even the 2019 defense had a bunch of first rounders. Like this defense doesn't have a bunch of first rounders. Yeah.
Yeah. Chase Young and Jeff Okudah were the number 2 and 3 picks in the draft off that team. So that's not even at its best before the Ohio State defense created some questions around itself in the Oregon game. Even before that, this is not like Ohio State has Donovan Ezeraku and Jay Higgins and Travis Hunter. Like, that's not what Ohio State's defense is. There are very many good veteran players, but the idea that, are we sure they're first or second team in the North, even at their best? I don't like JT Tuimoloau is a very good player. I didn't give 1 second of thought to JT Tuimoloau as first or second team player for here. No. And that's not a slight. It's just the reality of, like, I do just think people need to have the right idea about Ohio State defensively. It is not a bunch of first rounders. It is a ton of third, fourth, and fifth rounders, which is pretty darn good. But
really
does
good.
Not have it's not hugely impactful in an exercise like this.
Right.
They did get a first team safety though. So we went Caleb Downs of Ohio State and Xavier Watts of Notre Dame as our first team safeties by PFF grade. Watts is the number 4 safety in the North. Downs is the number 5 safety. But these are just dudes, right, Landis?
They are dudes. Xavier Watts is interesting to me because, like, Xavier Watts was a unanimous All-American last year and won the Nagurski Award, right? And it was just because he had a bunch of interceptions. Like, I don't think we had Xavier Watts like on our All-North team last year.
No, I don't think we did.
But like this year, he is still that productive in the passing game, and then he's just a madman against the run. Like, he's all over the place for Notre Dame's defense. So he, like, I didn't even consider him much last year. I thought it was odd that he got so much notoriety just for having a bunch of interceptions. But he is a complete safety this year, I think. And then Caleb Downs is as well. Caleb Downs is, I think, been by a significant margin Ohio State's best defensive player this year. So I think these two guys were no-brainers. Yeah.
Alabama's leading tackler is a true freshman last year. Maybe not a slow start, but first game or two, maybe not quite as all over the field. But now you just put on the Ohio State tape, and he makes 8 to 10 large plays a game.
Yeah, he does. Oh, yeah.
Jeremiah Cooper from Iowa State, rock solid guy. Glad we got him on the second team, and then Coy Parrish, as we talked about. Good safeties. I thought we landed on the right guys pretty quickly. Probably Jalen Reed. You talked about not having a Penn State guy in the secondary. They lost KJ Winston for the year as one of their really good safeties, but Jalen Reed is their other really good safety. They always have really good safeties at Penn State. So Jalen Reed was right in that mix. And then Miles Scott, the other of the Scott brothers. They're not really brothers, right? But they just have the last name
They're
Scott
not brothers.
in the Illinois secondary. Probably another guy that deserves some consideration. But I like our safeties. I like them. I'm happy with it.
Yep, I'm pretty good with it. Jalen Reed, I think, was a definitive 5th there, but I like the 4 that we picked. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about punters for like 10 or 12 minutes? What do you want to do?
No, we don't have to talk about it for 10 or 12 minutes. We went with Jack Bowmeister, and Ryan Eckley was our preseason punter, and both those guys had nice seasons. Reese Dakin from Iowa was kind of right there.
Right there.
He's probably not been as consistent as those other two guys. But if you look at like punts inside the 20 and stuff like that, Dakin, I believe, leads the North. But Bowmeister, in terms of like net and average, I just think made sense as the first team guy, and Eckley was kind of right there behind him.
All right. So those are our first and second team midseason KOTN all North picks. That is, 54 players, I think, the best 54 players in the North. If you have a different list of the best 54 players in the North, please send it along and we'll compare it. Let's do our Kings of the North ballot. We were in between last year on what to call this because the show is Kings of the North. And to repeat, you and I are not the Kings of the North. Here's the thing. I have a huge ego. But I am still surprised sometimes by how much some shows make it about the host or hosts. And I don't want this show to be about the hosts. I want it to be about the viewers and the listeners and the players and the coaches and the culture and the community. That we're all Kings of the North together, right? Do people still get that, Landis? We all are Northern royalty together as we contextualize, celebrate, stand up for, hold to account Northern football and everything that it means to the people who care about it. That's what makes you a king or queen or prince or princess of the North, a monarch of the North, Northern royalty. That's what it is. So did I want to call it the Doug Show initially? Sure. I mean, of course I wanted to call it the Doug Show. But like, here we are. So that's what it is. We're all kings of the North together. But for a while last year, we were like, is it the Knight of the North? I don't think we ever were Prince of the North, but we were definitely between Knight of the North and King of the North for the player award. But by the end of last year, we figured out it is King of the North. We gave it to Michael Penix Jr. last year. I don't know if Washington cared, but
it meant a whole lot to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think you've probably seen him walking around like the Falcons building with his big, we didn't even send him a shirt. We should really get him a shirt. Like, we'll just send him a shirt now to Atlanta. It's the King of the North. It's the Northern Heisman, Landis, right? That's the official name.
That is the official name. Although as you were talking, I kind of started rolling around like King of Kings in my head. If we're all kings, this is the kingiest of the kings, right? So yeah. I certainly like King of the North more than I like Knight of the North.
Yeah. That got a little, So I think we're on the right name. Are we on the right players? What's your current ballot for your top 5?
Yeah, so I have Ashton Jeanty, number 1, the running back from Boise State. I have Travis Hunter, number 2. I think those are the top 2 Heisman guys right now, right? In terms of odds. Am I not mistaken on that? Maybe I
will double check that. I am just so glad that we don't have to talk about Cam Ward as a Heisman person.
That's right. I have Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State, at number 3, and I have Desmond Reed, the running back from Pitt, at number 4. And I was a little torn what to do with my 5th spot because I think there are other guys that should be part of this conversation, and I was just kind of hopeful that you would put them on your ballot, so I didn't do it. And I really think what's happening in Army and Navy is very cool this year, and I think either one of their quarterbacks, Bryson Daly at Army or Blake Horvath at Navy, could be in the conversation for King of the North with what they've done. Certainly running the ball in those offenses, but also what they have unlocked for both of those offenses with their ability to throw the ball, which is not something either of those programs can really rely upon. So then I just picked the guy who's actually from the North, and that's Blake Horvath, who's from Ohio. Blake Horvath, the Navy quarterback, is my 5th King of the North candidate.
I'm very happy with where we landed on this, that we weren't having a discussion about Blake Horvath for the other stuff, but we are having discussion about him here. So this is the thing. We sometimes think kind of alike anyway, but then we talk about things with each other and we get the other guy to kind of come around on stuff. So my top 3 are basically the same as your top 3. And I don't know that I would have had Tyler Warren there if you didn't sort of talk about Tyler Warren in the way that you did. But I have Travis Hunter first because I do think what Travis Hunter is doing is so rare, so unique. It's nothing against Ashton Jeanty. I think he probably is the best running back in college football, but Travis Hunter is doing it on a regular basis against a higher level of competition. And Ashton Jeanty did tear up Oregon. I mean, that absolutely matters. But I just think Travis Hunter is so rare. And I think it's a little bit odd that if Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders weren't on the same team, I think like Shedeur Sanders might be at the top of the Heisman race. But like all the Colorado juice is with Travis Hunter. By odds, on the latest DraftKings Heisman odds, Ashton Jeanty is the favorite at plus 210. Dylan Gabriel is second at plus 320, and Travis Hunter is third at plus 550. So it's 3 Northern guys, and then Cam Ward of Miami at plus 650. So I have Hunter 1, Jeanty 2, Warren 3, which is the same as your top 3. I do have Dylan Gabriel 4 because this is sort of, as I said before, this is not just like individual statistics. This is more bigger picture, and he is the quarterback of the number 2 team in the country that just pulled off a huge win, and he played great. So a lot of other people would have Dylan Gabriel higher than where you and I have them. But I think people understand how we think, and we are on alert to move Dylan Gabriel up a list like this. And I wasn't sure. I really thought Desmond Reed deserved this consideration and that we both have him here. Yards from scrimmage, he's second in the country behind Ashton Jeanty, right? Haven't we had that conversation?
He is.
You combine it?
He's the only player in the country with 400 rushing yards and 300 receiving yards.
So that's real, and he is making an undefeated team go. And I think it's an absolute conversation. Like if Pitt wins the ACC, Des Reed in New York should be on the table. And then the guy that we had a Heisman conversation about 2 weeks ago, was my 6th guy. So that's Caleb Johnson of Iowa, and he just didn't have a huge game against Ohio State. He didn't do that much until late in the game. He had one big run, and then the second big run for a touchdown was against the Ohio State second team defense, but he's run for like 150 in every other game. But in his Northiest King of the North moment, in his Heisman moment, he didn't go nuts on the big stage. So that's why I think he's not in the top 5 for either of us, but he would be 6th for me.
Yeah, he was 6th for me as well. He was one of the guys I was alluding to that I didn't have that I was wondering if you would. I think that's where the kind of story of the season idea came into play and was a separating factor for me. It's just that like Iowa has 2 losses, and Caleb Johnson played really well in one of them against Iowa State, and then like did basically nothing against Ohio State. And like statistically, he's not that far off of what Ashton Jeanty has done, at least in terms of pure rushing yardage. But people aren't having a Barry Sanders conversation about Caleb Johnson, and we're having it about Ashton Jeanty. So, and then like I didn't have Donovan Ezeraku. I wondered if you might have him too. I think it makes sense to not have him. That's just more of like a statistical thing than it is anything else. So I think it's right that he's not here. But we also like to mix it up, right, and have a defensive guy. I think we had Joe Alt in our top 5 last year, the offensive tackle.
Yes.
So we like to go off the beaten path a little bit. So I thought if we did do that, Donovan Ezeraku might be a guy who enters the conversation.
To me, it's excellence that matters. I'm not sure it's much more than that. Excellence that matters. But that can apply to any team and any position, but it's the matters. So does your team matter? How much does what you do matter to your team? There are some positions where it just matters more. That's just the way the sport is shaped. But Joe Alt as a left tackle, like, really mattered to Northern College football last year. And Donovan Ezeraku, if we're talking about a 10-2 Boston College and he leads the nation in sacks, that really matters. So like we could absolutely get there. The Heisman odds right now, again, Ashton Jeanty 1, Dylan Gabriel 2, Travis Hunter 3, then 6 Southern guys. The 4th Northern guy in the Heisman odds is Drew Aller of Penn State. Now that is just Heisman odds are just trying to reflect whatever. That's quarterback of the undefeated number 3 team in the country. You know, you and I both have the Penn State tight end on our list, not the Penn State quarterback. Drew Aller is 30-1. Tyler Warren is 100-1 on the Heisman odds right now. But by Northern guys, Drew Aller is 4th. Kurtis Rourke, the Indiana quarterback, is 5th. Shadur Sanders is 6th. Will Howard is 7th. Jeremiah Smith is 8th. Avery Johnson of Kansas State is 9th. And Tyler Warren is tied with Riley Leonard and Emeka Ibuka for 10th among Northern guys and their Heisman odds right now. So that's where all that stands. We hope that was not tedious. We hope it was ball talk. We hope it was comprehensive and interesting. And we said every team's name, Landis, which is really, I mean, I'm sure people are tracking like, oh, did they even say Kansas? Yeah, we said it. Did they say Northwestern? We said it. Like, we acknowledged everybody. So 54 players representing 28 teams on our all-North midseason team. You feel good about it?
I do feel good about it. Yeah. I really hope it wasn't tedious because it was fun for us to put it together.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes we got to talk ball because it's a football show. Because, you know, we don't talk finances. We don't talk NIL deals. We don't talk constant conference commissioner meetings and that kind of thing. So like, if we're going to dig in hard on ball, yeah, we're good with that. We dug in hard on ball. Yep. That'd be another t-shirt, digging in hard on ball. When we come back, punt and block. When we come back, overrated Southern team. And then what I think is a really good conversation. It's your dose of Southern football that you need when we have 2 matchups of top 7 teams in the same weekend, Georgia at Texas and Alabama at Tennessee. We'll talk about that with Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South. All of that next on KOTN.
Bill Landis back here with your punt and block of the week on Kings of the North. We're going to start with a punt. We're going to Northwestern and Luke Akers. This is Luke Akers. He's kicking royalty. He's the son of Philadelphia Eagles legendary field goal kicker David Akers. This is in his blood. This is what he was born to do. So it's not surprising that Luke Akers got this punt to roll down to the 1-yard line in last week's game against Maryland. Nice win for Northwestern. good job in all facets, including on special teams, including winning the field position battle, courtesy of a game from Luke Akers, where he had 5 punts for 49.2 yard average and kicked 3 field goals because he's a Renaissance man and there's nothing he can't do when it comes to kicking a football. One last punt here from Luke. He bombs this one over the returner's head. The returner tries to fumble it and give it away initially. Instead, it's just really good field position, and Maryland would give it back on a strip sack a few plays later. Excellent work there by Luke Akers to help his team get a big win over Maryland. Now it's time for the block of the week, and it's not one person, it is a group of people. It is the Iowa offensive line in its game against Washington. Nothing too fancy here on block of the week, just good old-fashioned offensive line play out of Iowa. Iowa has the ball on its own 19-yard line. There's 26 seconds left in the first half. It's probably content to just run out the half, but Caleb Johnson instead decides he's going to get a 53-yard run that flips the field and puts the Hawkeyes in position to kick a field goal. And it happens, one, because Caleb Johnson's awesome and he can run through an arm tackle, but the work of the offensive line to spring this run, I just thought was really impressive. I've been impressed with the way that Iowa has run blocked all year. It starts with the center combination and right guard combination of Logan Jones and Connor Colby. If you look on the right side of the offensive line, how they work a combo block and get that sealed off. And then on the left side of the offensive line, it's Tyler Ellsbury and Mason Richmond doing a good job of comboing, then getting up to the second level. And then you get another block from tight end Luke Lachey down the field, which really kind of cleans up the last line of defense there before Caleb Johnson can get through the second level and out for 53 yards. Again, pay close attention. Start on the right side with the center and the right guard, and the way they take care of that defensive tackle, get him turned, create a nice lane there, and then the left guard and the left tackle climb in. Washington doesn't defend it all that well, but it's really good work, fundamental stuff from Iowa's offensive line. That's what Iowa does. Nice job there by the Hawkeyes to help Caleb Johnson spring that big run. That'll do it for block and punt of the week here on Kings of the North. Catch you next week with more blocks and more punts.
Just a absolute dream scenario for Landis to get to talk about the sons of 2 Philadelphia Eagles players in the same show, Luke Akers and Josiah Trotter. Again, Luke Akers his dad was a field goal kicker, was a kicker in the NFL. He's a punter, but Northwestern kicker Jack Olson was hurt and did not make the trip to Maryland, and so Luke Akers had to kick. And in addition, as Bill said, to the punting, he was 3 for 3 on field goals of 43, 38, and 38 yards, and made all 5 extra points. So, like, that is kind of bonkers for a guy to be able to do that, all 4 extra points. So, like, that's the world that he entered into. And so that's why he won a Bill Landis award. How about that for that guy? Overrated Southern team of the week. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I've been talking about it all week. The idea that LSU is number 8 in the country is incredibly fraudulent. They are so far from being that, but I just want to spell it out specifically. They lost 27-20 to USC in the opener in Vegas. USC has now lost to Michigan, Minnesota, and Penn State. So, okay, that's the team that LSU lost to. Their wins are over Nichols, who is a 2-4 FCS team, a 36-33 win over South Carolina, where they were down 17-0 in that game, and they had to score with a minute 12 left to win against a 3-3 South Carolina team. So they were down and had to scramble back against 3-3 South Carolina. And this is section. This is what we talk about. Is that great ball? Oh, Brian Kelly's guys. No, it's weird, crazy. You're better than them and you screwed around ball. It's exciting. It's interesting. It's not good. It's not a thing that should make you the number 8 team in the country. It's a fraud. They beat UCLA 34-17. That's 1-5 UCLA. They were tied at the half in that game. Okay? I was at LSU. They beat South Alabama 42-10. South Alabama is 3-4. So South Alabama is not good. And then they beat Ole Miss, fraudulent Ole Miss. This is what impressed everybody. Ole Miss is a complete fraud. Their best wins against Wake Forest. And LSU at home in the best home environment in the country, they had to score with 27 seconds left to tie it and then win in overtime. So they have Nichols, South Alabama, and 1-5 UCLA as 3 of their wins, and then crazy, ridiculous comebacks where they screwed around all game and then had to beat Ole Miss and South Carolina by that much and they're the number 8 team in the country. Ahead of undefeated BYU, ahead of undefeated Pitt, ahead of undefeated Indiana, and ahead of undefeated Iowa State. BYU has 2 top 25 wins. Iowa State has wins over West Virginia and Iowa. It's just absolutely fraudulent. And LSU's going to play, like, get Alabama at home later, and like you could go have the Garrett Nussmeier NFL dialogue that you want to have. Show me anything that has actually happened on a football field, a college football field in the year 2024, that justifies LSU being the number 8 team in the nation. I'll wait. I got time. I don't care about going over. Did you find anything? Let's talk Southern football. Connor O'Gara, he knows this stuff. So he's been on a couple times. I've been on his show. We like when the North and the South can come together, and you must be aware of these games. So we're going to talk it out with a guy who knows it. This is Bill and I talking with Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South. Joined now by Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South. Boy, you guys have fun on Saturdays, right? Saturdays, come on. College football Saturdays, you love it.
Look, that is the first time in the 9 years of working for this company that I've heard someone sing our name, but it was beautiful. I feel serenaded.
First time.
Yeah, very first time. Look, I've been with 10th season with our company. We've been in existence since 2010. We used to have offices down here in Orlando with a putting green and everything. So we used to kind of have like a collaborative effort for it. And then like 2017, we've been remote ever since. But yes, I enjoy Saturdays sitting on my couch in front of the TV for 15 hours.
My gift to you, if you guys want to clip me singing Saturday Down South and use it on your show, free of charge. Okay.
It's bad enough that I'm thinking there's a really good chance that on my Sunday recap pod, I'm going to have to start it by saying, Doug Lesmerises, he knows football. Georgia has lost multiple games in the regular season, and I am living up to my end of the bet. I am an idiot. That wasn't part of it, the end of it, but the first part was.
No, you may add it. This is our bet that we made that if Georgia...
Did you just do the LeBron celebration when he was doing that?
Yeah,
he's a king. He's a king of the North.
That's true.
We bet whether Georgia would have a record of 10-2 or worse, or no, you had So
I had 11-1. I had 11-1. I gave you anything worse than that in the regular season.
Because I originally was floating around 9-3, but then you were nice to me. So anyway, if they lose their second game of the season against Texas on Saturday, we're going to get into the 2 big Southern games. But Bill, I just want to kind of run with Connor quickly through who he thinks like the 5 most dangerous teams are in this SEC/South for Northern fans. So however you want to do this, Connor, I think they could be dangerous as national title contenders. I think they could be dangerous as they're going to steal a playoff spot from maybe a Northern team, like in the 10-11 range, that kind of thing. But just so like, it's your thing. You're the Southern expert here. When you think of like the most dangerous team in Southern football, who is it?
It's Texas. I mean, Texas and Oregon right now, like I kind of pick your poison. Who's the best team in college football? I think Texas has been the more complete team start to finish. And they've already endured, obviously, the quarterback injury to Quinn Ewers, which is just like, check that off the box of things that Texas, knows how to deal with at this point. I'm still going to include Georgia in that, despite what was just said, because I don't think they have figured out the thing that they do best yet, which is a weird thing to say about a Georgia team at this point of the season. And if they do figure out what that is, what their identity is, maybe need to get a little bit healthier in the front 7. I'm still going to say that Georgia, with the best coach in the sport, is still among the most dangerous teams in college football. Albeit
the best shover in the sport.
Have you seen every coach in the sport shove? Because I don't know that we can say that either.
I know that's. That was a really good shove, though. So, do you get when you're doing? And here we go, Kirby Smart. Hey, everybody! I just want to say hello. I'm sorry. Oh, you're in my way. I shoved you. I didn't mean to. I'm the best coach in college football. Connor O'Gara said it. That means I don't have to play by the rules, so I can shove anybody that I want to shove. That's how we do it here in Georgia.
Whoa. First of all, the state of Ohio originated that. If we want to go full Woody Hayes,
all right, fired.
Exactly, a little bit more intentional with what he was doing.
Are we on the firing countdown for Kirby Smart? I didn't realize that was underway.
No, we are very much not. The difference is intent, I would say, probably with a shove, and I'm not defending the shove. Kirby, in my opinion, blacked out with rage in that moment. White hot rage. And I think honestly, if we really want to dig into kind of the psychoanalytical, breakdown of why a grown man does that on a football field with everybody watching him, I think he's enraged by this team. I think that he was at that point where even one of the most decorated coordinators in the sport, Glenn Schumann, was about to get an earful, and then Michael Van Buren, the poor Mississippi State quarterback, got in the middle of that. And I don't think he had any idea who he was shoving in that moment, but horrible look. It's a terrible, terrible look for a guy that has had no shortage of terrible looks with an offseason, full season, I guess, with 7 players that have been arrested. But I would still probably put Georgia in that. And maybe Kirby's shoving could be a little bit of an asset, like that coach from Friday Night Lights, the show, who went ballistic and shoved that. Who is it? I think he shoved Smash. Smash was about, no, it was Riggins. It was Riggins that he shoved as he was about to go into the end zone and kind of lost his mind and then lost his coaching career.
So here's the deal. I understand that nobody in the South is going to hold Kirby Smart accountable. If we are going to get anywhere toward the shove turned around Georgia's season, I'm coming down with my sword.
We're not. I'm just telling you, I think he's that upset. I think he's that upset with his team. I don't think that's a rallying cry. I think that is a sign of where things are at with Georgia. I just told you I think Georgia's going to lose on Saturday night, and I'm going to sheepishly get up to my own airwaves, tail between my legs, and talk about how this Northerner, Doug Lesmerises, is the smartest man in the world. No, but oh God, I will not do the LeBron celebration. I promise my listeners that I will not do that. But I'm repping the Bulls right now. I'm repping a certain Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen. I come in peace as always.
Kings of the North. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, look, Georgia's still to be feared. I think that's the main takeaway from all that.
Bill, do you agree? Texas won, Georgia 2, most dangerous Southern teams?
Yeah, I think so. I was pretty high on Alabama, but they've given me reason to not be lately. So, yes, definitely Texas. And then I think a gap, right? Like maybe even a considerable gap. Then I would probably go Georgia second. Yeah.
I don't have Alabama on my list of those 5 teams, by the way, because I think Alabama has shown you, and maybe that'll change this weekend. I mean, that's kind of been the story of college football. Just if you don't like something, wait a weekend and it'll change.
Yeah.
But I don't think Alabama's feared. And if we're talking about most feared teams, when South Carolina comes into your home after you just got embarrassed by Vandy, and South Carolina is able to play a 60-minute football game with you, I don't think that we should be talking about Alabama as feared. I don't think we should be talking about Alabama as a national title contender at this point with all the issues that they have on the defensive side of the ball. So I wasn't going to include them. I was going to instead include LSU, who I don't think LSU is actually a top 10 team in the country, but I think you saw on Saturday night.
You are making friends. You are making friends on this show right now, Connor. Neither do I.
So my co-host Will Ogburn is a diehard LSU fan, like through and through. I was actually just talking to, if you guys know Van Lathan, who does great work for The Ringer, like he and I have like a fun back and forth, and like we'll DM about, LSU things every once in a while. And I talk with a lot of different LSU people in my life about this team. And I think Saturday night, every LSU fan walked away from that game going, should have lost it. Don't have the horses. Should have lost at home as an underdog against Ole Miss, but Death Valley at night just kind of won out. And Garrett Nussmeier was brilliant down the stretch. And I think that the reason that they would be feared, though, is because I think Garrett Nussmeier is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in college football. I think NFL people are seeing the things that he's doing. And you're seeing an LSU defense that even though it lost Harold Perkins to a season-ending injury, they're still being put in such better spots with Blake Baker as that defensive coordinator. He looks like he's worth every penny with some of the things that they're doing and the improvement they've shown. So I would still say that LSU was feared with also one of the best coaches in college football with Brian Kelly, who I know they got from the North as well. So I put LSU.
Have lost to USC, who lost to 3 Northern teams. So we're just throwing facts out there.
Let the man make his list, Doug.
It's a worthy point. It's a worthy point. But at the same time, like LSU, Brian Kelly losing a season opening game. I mean, come on. Like
That's true.
Where have I seen that before?
Mulligan. We'll give him a mulligan. All right. So LSU on the list. Okay. I get that.
I would put Miami on that list. Okay. You have to. I mean, Cam Ward, if you don't fear Cam Ward, you are probably Cam Ward. Like that's the only person right now who shouldn't fear that guy. Even I think Cal by the end of that game was like, okay, we fear Cam Ward and we fear what he's doing. And he's such a big part of this dramatic turnaround for Mario Cristobal.
The other thing that doesn't fear Cam Ward is November. But go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, I think Mario Cristobal might fear Cam Ward.
I agree.
Because of what Cam Ward is capable of.
It's like, hey, Cam, we'll give you whatever you want in terms of the NIL package. We'll take care of that. We'll get you in the nicest penthouse suite down here in Miami. We'll get you taken care of. How do you want to run practice, man? Like, how do you want this thing to go? You don't want to do conditioning? That's fine. Just take a seat. You're going to be good. Cam Ward should be feared. You can't count him out of a football game. And say what you want about the mistakes that he made against Cal. The comeback was still remarkable given, the stakes of that game for Miami. And I do think that this is a program that is figuring its way out. And, who knows if this is going to end up being 2017 all over again. We all remember A-Rod and J-Lo, who were just losing their minds as Miami was kicking the living snot out of Notre Dame, Northern team. And there were so many people that were crowning Miami, the U is back. And then it fell apart and they lost 3 in a row. Pat Narduzzi called his shot. But yeah, I do think that Miami is a team that right now you look at them, they have to be feared. They are a very, very scary team. It feels like they're playing with house money and perhaps a lot of their own money.
Literally. Yeah, that's right. Okay. One more team to fear.
Okay, this is a little cop-out. Here. This is a shared spot. This is a shared spot for, and I guess LSU would fall into this camp as well, but this is we counted you out based on how you looked in week 1, and now we're starting to fear you category. And I'm going to put Texas A&M and Clemson both in that.
Okay. I grabbed this in case you were going to say Ole Miss, but now I'm going to.
No. You don't fear Ole Miss. Ole Miss out of the playoff conversation. They're not running the table. Even if they go 9-3, I'd leave them out of the playoff. Despite the fact that, I think they made all those improvements that they talked about on the defensive line, and that unit has been as advertised, if not better. But their offensive line is a train wreck. Jackson Dart turtles in too many of these moments. If Juice Wells isn't going to be 2022 Juice Wells, you just can't rely on them. So I would take them out of that conversation. I would put Texas A&M and Clemson and two quarterbacks that were written off in the season opener, Connor Wigman and Cade Klubnik. Two guys that have come back with a vengeance. The performance that Connor Wigman had against Mizzou was exactly why I spent an entire offseason talking about, guys, I think he has all SEC upside. And when Trevor Sikkema came out with that very controversial take for PFF of could this guy be QB1 in the 2025 NFL draft class? I was kind of like, I don't hate that. Now, I wouldn't put him in that camp just yet because the sample size is still so small, but you see the pieces coming together in that Colin Klein offense. And then with Cade Klubnik, you see the pieces coming together with the Garrett Riley offense. So those are two teams. And with a Mike Elko defense, I mean, guys, Nick Scorton, I've been trying to tell people for a while, he is remarkable. And I spent an entire offseason saying, look, what this guy did as a 19-year-old to lead the Big Ten in sacks, to come back home to Bryan College Station, he is going to do such great things in the Mike Elko defense. And sure enough, you're seeing that play out.
Does that seem like a dangerous list to you, Landis? What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's more or less, I think, what my list would be. I'm less high on LSU. I do agree about Garrett Nussmeier though, but I think I'm less high on the team as a whole. I do find A&M and Clemson potentially quite dangerous among removed from the obvious Southern teams, I guess. And I would also like to point out, Doug, we did our quarterback matchup draft with Ari Wasserman way back when. And when we talked about the A&M Notre Dame game, I said one of these two guys is going to become the guy who surges up the draft boards. Now, that game had nothing to do with it. And Riley Leonard has not quite figured out the forward pass yet. But it does seem like Connor Wigman is making the move that I thought one of those two guys would make. And then when you combine that with the defense, I find A&M to be quite interesting at this juncture of the season. Yeah.
A&M's fascinating because obviously they're a team that's never made it to Atlanta. They've never made it to an SEC championship. So if you're talking about stealing a bid from a Northern team, maybe not, but they're one of 3 teams in the SEC that's still unbeaten in conference play, with Texas and LSU being the other 2. So I think that's kind of why you have to include them. It's like, all right, yeah, they had that non-conference loss to Notre Dame, but if they're still going to be one of those teams that's playing in, maybe they're going to end up being 9-3 or something like that, but they end up making it to the SEC championship, then you just kind of never know with a team like that and what they're capable of, because their schedule is really favorable, and like all their big time games are at home. They get Texas at home. Obviously, if they win that one, we're having a much different conversation about year one with Mike Elko.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting. I think it'll depend where Notre Dame is in the playoff landscape, potentially at the end, right? A head-to-head win. If they're like in the same group of teams with a similar resume, that's going to favor Notre Dame. If Notre Dame falls apart and it's like, my God, they lost at home to a 7-5 Notre Dame team. Maybe if Notre Dame runs the table and like Notre Dame's clearly in, then all of a sudden it's like, it's a good loss for A&M. And so like all these little things are going to matter as we go through it. And these two games this weekend are going to matter. So Connor, we do want to talk about these two Southern games that we have a nice Northern slate, and our Northern fans should have plenty to watch. But let's start with Bama and Tennessee. It's a 3:30 game. Bama at Tennessee. Bama's ranked number 7. Tennessee is ranked number 11. I have started to float the idea of Kalen DeBoer being a Rich Rodriguez fit at Alabama.
Oh,
I kind of thought it at the beginning, just like, doesn't mean you're a bad coach, but I don't know if you're the right guy for that spot. If they lose to Tennessee, given what has happened the last 2 weeks, like how hot is it going to get in Tuscaloosa if this goes poorly for the Tide?
To be fair, Rich Rodriguez as an Alabama fit, we didn't really see if he got to fit because his wife allegedly didn't want any part of that.
No, but I mean, like Rich Rod at Michigan was like that. That was like oil
Michigan,
and water. Yeah. Like what he was like. He's a good coach. He's a successful coach. Let's take this guy. You get to Michigan. It's like you don't fit here. That's what I wonder about Kalen DeBoer. You're a successful coach. Maybe you don't fit there. So like that's the part of it that I wondered about previously, and I'm wondering more about now.
I think that we probably overlooked some of the transition that Rich Rod was trying to like implement with bringing in, his style of offense there.
For sure.
The Tate Forcier, Ryan Mallett decision will live in infamy, in my opinion. But yeah, trust me. I remember plenty of Tate Forcier.
God, you light up when we talk Northern football. Just come back, man. Come on. Look at you. You're live right now.
No. Look, we trust me, we spent plenty of time watching Tate Forcier back in the day. Remember a certain game he played against Notre Dame that was fun to watch. But I do think that the Kalen DeBoer Alabama fit is fascinating because I think offensively, Bama fans still feel relatively satisfied. Now, they didn't feel very satisfied watching Jalen Milroe drift into a safety last week and watching him regress to pre-2023 benching type decisions. But the big question was going to be Kane Womack, which I've been pronouncing his last name Womack for the last 5 years, even though I'm an Indiana grad and I've pronounced it Womack and it's Womack. So even saying his name is awkward for me at this point. I don't think Alabama fans want to say his name with how bad that defense has been the last 10 quarters, dating back to the halftime. The lack of adjustments that they've really made over the course of this 2.5 game stretch is so alarming. And they're used to a certain standard at Alabama of bad defense. Don't worry, Nick Saban will figure it out. He'll make those in-game adjustments. He'll make those week-to-week adjustments. That's not there. And when Lenore Sellers, with all due respect to him, is taking you down to the wire and finding Nick Harbor in the end zone to be able to force a potential tie. Yeah, people are asking questions. They're legitimate questions. I don't know that long-term it's going to be like a decade-long hire or anything like that, but the defensive hire has to work out. And if it doesn't, you're just doomed in that spot when you're replacing Nick Saban.
They're pretty young. Aren't they playing a decent amount of freshmen on defense?
Yeah, Kamani Jackson, the guy who made the interception to seal the game, is true freshman. And by the way, that play, he could have been... If he kneels in the end zone, that's
he almost kneeled for a safety.
It ties the game. If that happens and it's 27-25 in that moment, and I'm thinking he's about to kneel this, and then it's Malachi Moore, ironically enough, the guy who self-combusted and just tried to take on that entire defensive staff a week earlier in the loss to Vandy. He's the guy who says, no, run this out. You need to run this out or else we will tie and go into overtime and it'd be an all-time Alabama blunder. You talk about what they would have said about Kalen DeBoer if that had happened. I'm just
trying to think about what Doug would have said if Alabama lost South Carolina because a player mistakenly kneeled for a safety that tied the game.
Oh, man.
What lost the game, I guess,
Look, I look forward to Saturday night. I look forward to Doug's tweets on Saturday night during this Alabama-Tennessee game, which the Tennessee offense against the Alabama defense, it's like the something's got to give, nothing's got to give type matchup. going into this one with how much they've struggled, both 10 quarter struggles that they've been facing. But yeah, it feels in a way like a playoff elimination game. I know it's the expanded playoff and everybody can go 10-2 and get in, but it does feel so pivotal with the point of the season that we're at.
Who do you think wins this one, Connor?
Leaning Tennessee.
Okay.
I can't trust Bama in this defense right now. And I'm trying to envision, I'm like, so I just watched Bama with this offensive line, which has issues at tackle. And don't you know it, Kyle Kennard, the transfer from Georgia Tech, who's just been a revelation for South Carolina alongside the true freshman heat-seeking missile that is Dylan Stewart. Those guys have been phenomenal, and they ate up that Alabama offensive line. What do we think James Pierce Jr. is going to do? Because that guy's a top 5 pick, and he's got a loaded defensive line that he's working off. He's really starting to come into his own this year, and he was brilliant in that game against Florida. He had the strip sack, not strip sack, but the forced fumble recovery of Graham Mertz on the goal line in that one. So I'm looking at that matchup going, man, I don't know that Milroe handles that. Milroe's been great on the road, though, compared like his home road splits would kind of surprise you. He's been a better player on the road, so that could win out, but I got to think that Tennessee's got more working in its favor. And I think they're going to be able to lean on that ground game a bit to be able to kind of take Alabama out of rhythm. I still think Dylan Sampson is such a phenomenal player. And even if this Tennessee offensive line and Nico Iamaleava still has issues in the passing game that they're figuring out, I just think that they have more things working in their favor. So yeah, I'm surprisingly picking Tennessee to win as like a 3-point dog.
Okay. The best thing in this game is Tennessee's defense, right?
Yeah. It is. And they lost, they lose Peely, the ageless linebacker, to a season-ending injury last week, which is devastating for that group. They still looked really good afterwards. And up until DJ Lagway makes that miracle throw on 3rd and 18 for the touchdown with, Billy Napier decides to not go for 2. Like Tennessee's defense was showing up and showing out, and it looked awesome. So I think they are absolutely the strength in this game. And I think they're very capable of giving Alabama a lot of problems.
So Bama is a 3-point favorite on the road in that one. A little bit of a light 3:30 schedule in the north: Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Michigan, Illinois, Houston, Kansas. So you're allowed to put this one in your 4-box, Northern fans. Alabama versus Tennessee. Then 7 p.m. or 7:30 or 7. Georgia at Texas. This is the primetime one, 7:30 on ABC. Landis, you excited for this one, man? You're allowed to say you are.
I am excited for this one. I like watching Texas play. I'll admit that as a steward of Northern college football,
yes.
I very much enjoy watching Texas play. So I'm pretty fired up for this game.
How can
Texas,
you not?
Favored by 3.5 at home. Texas is. Like, you think this is a banger, Connor? This is going to live up to it?
I think Texas wins by 3 touchdowns.
Oh, I love you. I love you. Oh, where is it? I'll look for my hat. Oh,
dog mentality.
Oh, you're hired. You're hired. Why? I don't disagree, but why do you think that?
I talked about before how I don't know that Georgia knows what it does best. What's the flaw with Texas? They haven't seen a stellar offense just yet. Okay, they'll see a pretty good one with Georgia coming in. Are they going to see a great offense? Nope. Georgia's not shown it can be a great offense yet. They haven't had the game-breaking plays in the ground game. They still have struggled to find that go-to receiver, which I didn't think would be as much of an issue in a post-Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey world, but it has been, and they've just really struggled in those areas, even though Dylan Bell is a really nice player, but a go-to guy needs to emerge, and it hasn't emerged just yet. It almost felt like last week Georgia spent the entire game throwing a million passes with Carson Beck just so that they could find that go-to receiver. And that's something that they're still trying to search for with that identity. And I just look at this Texas team and I'm like, where are the flaws? Because we haven't seen them yet. We haven't seen them come out. Oh, are they going to be able to replace Sweat and Murphy up front? Yeah. They're going to be just fine. They got Trey Moore. They got Colin Simmons, this true freshman. Trey Moore, the transfer from UTSA. Like, they're going to be okay. The back end of that group is so phenomenal. The secondary is great. They have Anthony Hill Jr., who looks like the second coming of Roquan Smith, which I'm sure Georgia fans wouldn't want me to say that. But they do these things so well on the defensive side of the ball that people have not paid attention to because we've been talking about this offense. And meanwhile, Texas has the number 1 scoring offense. They're number 1 in the country in yards per play allowed. And they do things so effective on that side of the ball that I don't know where Georgia's going to get them. And Kirby Smart and I tweeted this out earlier, Kirby Smart, true road games against AP top 10 teams, 0-3. All three of those teams have scored at least 40 points against him. Texas becomes the fourth. I think Texas wins this game going away.
Landis, are you surprised to hear Connor say that?
No, because I watched Alabama's offense put Georgia in a blender for a half before Alabama got it figured out. And it's like, I like Kalen DeBoer. I think Sark is very capable of doing the same thing. And he has, I think, better players to do it too. So I kind of think Texas wins big too. I guess I like what Texas has done to make its secondary better because that was its weakness last year, right? And I suppose it's a fair point that it hasn't quite been tested yet, and maybe Georgia will show us something that we haven't seen from Texas' secondary yet, but I don't know that I'm worried about that. And I don't think Georgia can stop Texas. So I would not be surprised at all by a big Texas win.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot of Carson Beck too, trying to throw off platform, which is something that he's getting better at. It's still, I don't know that something that it's his strength. And I just don't, you can't trust Georgia without Tate Ratledge on that offensive line to be able to pass protect in the way that they would like to run that offense. And I think that's going to be a big advantage for Texas.
So Bama still has LSU and Missouri, the Auburn game at the end of the year. Georgia still has Tennessee. They still have Ole Miss. If both Georgia and Bama come out of this weekend with 2 losses in mid-October, are those fan bases going to be in full panic mode? Are we officially on either or both of those teams could miss the playoff alert? Like, what's it going to be like for you guys on your show on Monday if Tennessee and Texas win these games?
First of all, we're a Sunday show. That's how we grind.
Are you serious? You get after it that hard?
Oh gosh, we go. Look, not to go full like respect the grind. I work not to do that because that's overdone in today's day and age. But yeah, I usually am in bed by about 2:30 on Saturday going into Sunday. My daughter wakes me up probably like 7:15, 7:30. Sometimes I get to sleep like an extra half hour, and then I'm usually recording by like 10 a.m. We get our stuff up and out there. I can't do the late night. Like I know you guys record at like 11 o'clock on Saturday night. I can't. Like I'm not in the right headspace, and I still have like writing and stuff that I try and knock out. But so on Sunday, will we be talking about like if Georgia and Alabama are free falling, like. Yeah, I mean that's the thing about the SEC is that when those teams are collapsing, it's actually when people are the most engaged because it feels like everybody else has a chance. And how many times is it Georgia and Alabama that are just sitting there in the SEC championship? I mean, they've claimed all of the SEC championships in the 2020s decade. Bama's won 3 of them. Yeah, you better believe people feel like, oh my God, we actually have a chance to be able to get to Atlanta. That creates intrigue. And like that's maybe the misconception of the outside world of like what the SEC is. As much as the SEC has this like bravado, the SEC chance, there is nothing SEC fans love more than watching their rival fail. They love watching their rival fail more than they love watching their own team win. And if they get to do that on Saturday, buddy, the numbers will be good on Sunday. They'll be very good if that happens. We'll just say that.
I've always said this, Landis. I love the South. I love it. Oh,
famously.
It's so great. Landis, what will our show be like on Saturday night if Bama and Georgia both lose?
I just hope I can get a word in. Like I might just be along for the ride, sipping my late night coffee as you swing your sword around. Hopefully, don't hurt anybody.
Saturday. That's a 2-sword Saturday if Bama and Georgia both lose. Connor, great insight on this, man. Remind the people again if they want to follow you guys and all the content you're bringing about Southern football. Where can they get you?
Yeah, I really appreciate it. If you're not. If hopefully I didn't turn you off from all things Southern football, and
that was great.
Hopefully I brought a little bit of attention to it, and it's not all just homers all the time here. But yeah, SaturdayDownSouth.com is where all of our written content is. Saturday Down South podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. At Sat Down South on Twitter. We just have so much that goes on a given Saturday, and our news team does a great job of keeping up with it. If you're one of those people that's like, oh hey, I got to go out to the pumpkin patch this Saturday. We got to do our fall activities. We're going apple picking or something like that. And you're like, I missed 6 hours of college football, and it's a great place to be able to kind of catch up. We've got all the news stories, everything big that happens. We have it covered on SaturdayDownSouth.com.
Awesome. And actually, we'll just wrap it up there. So thanks as always to our producer, Mike Urostowski. Thanks to Connor O'Gara for breaking it all down. A very valuable Southern football information that matters to all of our Northern listeners here. So thanks again to Connor. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.